A growing number of pot users are driving high and paying the price. More than 40% of victims of fatal vehicle accidents over the past 6 years have had elevated levels of THC in their blood, a new study shows. Researchers looked at deceased drivers in Ohio, which legalized the drug for recreational use in 2023. Studies have shown that THC can impair driving, but the active substance can remain in a person's system long after the effects have worn off, making it harder to detect accurately and reliably. Researchers are still searching for a tool that can detect marijuana impairment as effectively as an alcohol breathalyzer. As the White House considers reclassifying cannabis as a less dangerous drug, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy warned against it this week. In August, the American Trucking Association sent a letter to Duffy stating it was, quote, deeply concerned about the safety risks of rescheduling marijuana without explicit safeguards to preserve the necessary testing authority and technical requirements for DOT-regulated safety-sensitive workers. As of 2025, medical marijuana is legal in 40 states, while recreational marijuana is legal in 24 states. The American public overwhelmingly supports the legalization, according to a recent Gallup poll, with 70% in favor of it. Here to discuss is former NFL player for the Minnesota Vikings and federal commissioner for the Commission of Social Status of Black Men and Boys, Jack Brewer. Jack, your thoughts on the study and the president's decision, which he's been weighing on now for the past few weeks?
Well, I'll also add to my resume, I was a 20-year marijuana user. So I used to smoke marijuana after football games as a treatment to my injuries. And I can tell you right now, it does impair you. And I think this study changes the game. You know, the marijuana industry is one that has grown across the board, as you can see. And I think from a medical perspective, it's something that's needed. It may be needed to be even used more. But the fact that you're, having recreational laws passed across the country, and now younger kids are getting access to it, and then people are starting to be really fooled to think that it doesn't cause them harm, and you just cannot focus the same way once you start smoking marijuana. And that's why you see such a high percentage. You're talking about 40, 50, and sometimes 60% of deadly accidents are happening because people are using marijuana. I think this is a wake-up call to our nation, and I think if they start polling after putting out this information, those polls will change.
Yeah, because as I said, the Gallup poll says 70% of Americans want to see legalization across the board. But, this problem, police are having a problem with this because they can't detect marijuana like they can with alcohol with a breathalyzer. If you're over a certain limit, you get pulled over for a DWI or driving while impaired. But with marijuana, it's completely different.
Completely different. And then when you combine marijuana use with legal drugs like alcohol and other drugs, then the situation gets worse and worse. It's about impairment. It's about the ability to drive vehicles. You have other people on the streets. You have children on the streets. You have school buses on our streets. We don't need a bunch of people getting high being able to drive on the streets across America. President Trump needs to really rethink his approach when it comes to marijuana. Enough is enough. I fully support Secretary Duffy. I think he's taken a very strong stance, and he knows he's a father of 9 children. He doesn't want people driving around the streets of America high on dope. It's time to have some common sense again in this country. If people want to go get a medical card and get their treatment and use it like any other drug, let them do so. But you should have to be responsible when taking over a vehicle and driving, particularly on the roads of America.
Well, the cannabis industry would argue for reclassifying it. They've actually lobbied President Trump on behalf of reclassifying marijuana into a lesser drug. For what you've really already said, for medical purposes, it allows doctors to explore other agents that it could be that marijuana could help with other disorders. And right now, at its current classification, it prohibits that. So what do you say to that argument?
Well, listen, I had 9 surgeries in the NFL. If I go right now and the doctor prescribes me to take opioids, I would rather take marijuana than take opioids and put that into my system. But the problem begins when we start to talk about driving and driving vehicles and doing these things while you're intoxicated. And if we don't have the ability at our law enforcement agencies to test for marijuana when people are driving, and then we look up and we see that the studies show that there are 40, 50, 60% of accidents in some places happening because people are high off marijuana, we have a crisis. And so this is the time that policy needs to change. And it doesn't need to change in favor of something that we can't detect. It needs to change to follow along with common sense. And common sense would tell you that people don't need to smoke dope and be able to drive vehicles. So until we can figure that out, let's not pass any more laws to reclass anything.
You know, and you're so right. But you don't even need to smoke dope anymore. There's edibles now that a lot of people are taking. And there was a report in the New York Times a few weeks ago about children actually getting into their parents' edibles, bringing them to school, and being hospitalized because they thought they were just regular gummy bears. So, you know, the medical marijuana industry has proliferated across the country. Recreational marijuana, you can order it through the mail. In a different state if it's not legal. I think there needs to be some reconsideration in terms of what we're using marijuana for, its applications and availability.
No question. We're targeting terrorists and drug terrorists from Venezuela and all over the world that are coming in, giving drugs to our kids, and these marijuana dealers and these people making these gummies and these things that are getting in the systems of children need to pay that same price. If you are making products or you're someone who has these things and it's bringing harm to a kid, you need to be held accountable. And that's where the criminal justice system needs to come into play. And that's why we need to make sure that we keep our laws really protecting the most vulnerable in our nation.
All right, Jack Brewer, thank you so much for stopping by this afternoon.
Thank you. God bless you.